If you watch our videos in Social 118, you know that I'm trying not to impose my own belief system onto students. That what we're trying to do in this classroom, in this space right here, is to give students opportunities to think on their own terms and to understand the ways in which ideas and thoughts that come at them are often slanted in one direction or another. Our sponsor this semester, our very first sponsor, is Ground.News. It's the perfect sponsor for this class, and I'm really happy to endorse them, and I'm happy to get behind them. If you subscribe for Ground.News using the code in the description, the link in the description, you get 40% off the Vantage plan. That's the plan that we use in here. And I can't say enough how important this is and how valuable it is to have a better understanding of the ways in which news is coming at you and the ideological perspectives that people are taking who are sharing the news. So sign up for Ground.News. It's awesome. Like, I hope all of my students sign up for Ground.News, actually. All right, let's introduce the three of you. We'll start with you. Just the kind of the basics. Where are you from? First name, just first names. Where are you from? What do you study? And, you know,
okay.
Do you have a Portuguese water dog?
Okay.
All right.
Hi, my name is Charlie. I'm from Maplewood, New Jersey, which is about 3.5 hours away. I'm studying ad PR, and I don't have a Portuguese water dog, but I have a Cavapoo, just another mutt poodle
cool
thing,
dogs.
but she's cute.
All right, that's cool. All right.
Hello, my name is Robin. My Korean name is Gyu Young. I'm from South Korea. I'm an economics major, and I have a poodle.
Well, you're from South Korea, but you lived for a long time in China, right?
That is true.
Okay, good. So you're going to talk about both, actually. Okay.
Hi, my name is Elijah. I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'm a junior studying astronomy and astrophysics.
Astronomy and astrophysics? Yeah.
One major.
It's one thing. Yo, when I was over the break, my wife and I went to Winnipeg. And don't ask me why we went to Winnipeg, by the way. We showed up at the airport in Winnipeg on the 24th, Christmas Eve. And the guy at the customs, you know, he said, why are you here in Winnipeg? And we said, we're on vacation. He said, no, seriously, why are you here in Winnipeg? We said, no, we're on vacation. He's like, nobody comes to Winnipeg ever for vacation. And he said, do you know somebody? We're like, no, man, we just came to Winnipeg. We like the name. So, but we went to a planetarium, and yeah, it was very cool, man, very cool. All right, so listen, today we're going to talk about critical thinking. And I should add, and I want to say this to the class, we talk about all the topics that we discuss in here I think are really interesting and valuable, and you will as well, but some topics are really much more edgy than other days. And so it just kind of depends on where things fall and what we do. But today I want to talk about critical thinking. So what one of you can start? What's critical thinking? When you hear that term, what is that to you? Like, and again, this is one of those moments when we don't want the textbook definition of critical thinking. We want to know what it means to you in your own words. When you hear that, where's your mind go? And you should also know, Charlie and Elijah and Robin, that I don't necessarily expect, even though these are words that we throw around a lot, like your professors throw them around or people throw them around, but I don't necessarily think that it's often that the kinds of things that we talk about up here are things that everybody thinks about but doesn't think about. It's kind of like, do you ever watch like a stand-up comedian, and the stand-up comedian tells a joke and you're thinking, it's almost like you're thinking it right when they're saying it. You know, like, oh, I've thought of this before, but you haven't really, but you have. So anyway, that's where we're at. So critical thinking, what's that mean for you?
I would say it's putting like a bunch of problems together and then coming up with a solution.
Putting problems together, coming up with some kind of solution.
I was thinking putting a bunch of solutions to solve
Hold
one
the
single
mic
problem.
closer.
I was thinking of putting multiple solutions to solve one single problem.
A lot of solutions to solve one single problem. Dude, okay, both of those. That's very cool. Okay, I like that. Yeah.
I was gonna say that when I think of, at least what I try to do when I, try to think critically about things is like putting biases aside and like feelings aside and trying to stay objective about things.
Okay.
And like drawing conclusions from that.
Okay. All right, that's cool. I like that. Biases aside. So what when you think about critical thinking in yourself, your own development and growth, what do you think? Like what comes to mind?
I was thinking like just putting up like a lot of your experiences in life, come up with that solution, use different perspectives from like what other people might think, what I would think, and then to solve that problem.
Charlie, how about, hey, when you heard him say, he was, so Robin said the opposite of what you said. What you said was very cool. What do you think about him, what he said?
I thought, to me, they sound the same. Like, I agree. Like, I feel like it's just putting a bunch of things together to come out with another, I don't like the word thing, but another thing. Like, you put together a bunch of stuff that's happening, and then you come up with a better output. So either you're putting together a bunch of problems to create a better solution, or you're putting together a bunch of stuff to fix a problem.
So let me ask you this. How about, how often do you engage with other people in what you would consider to be critical thinking?
I would say definitely like in classes, like in college, I would say there's critical thinking when we're talking about hard discussions, but I would also say there's critical thinking when it comes to politics and religion and friendships, deciding whether to go get food or stay at home. Like, I think you can critical think kind of wherever.
So in your daily life,
yeah.
Do you consider yourself a critical thinker?
I would say I weigh out the problems and I try to critically think, at least like not jump to conclusions fast.
Meaning that you are, before you jump into something, you take a step back and say, what?
Yeah.
What do you say to yourself?
Why am I doing this? For what am I doing this for? Pros and cons. I'm a big pro and con person. Just like before I step out the door, like, do I have all my stuff? Like, if I wasn't critically thinking, I would walk outside in a bathing suit, but it is 6 degrees out, so I critically thought and I put on a long coat.
You're taking data and you're putting the data together in the computer on top of your shoulders, and you're saying like, okay.
Big computer in my brain.
Hey, Robin, how about you? Like, how often would you say you're engaging? You're practicing critical thinking.
I would say constantly. I'm constantly critically thinking.
Yeah. What makes you say that?
Because even when I'm speaking right now, I am going through my brain step by step, thinking what I should think, when I should even breathe. Like, I would say that was critically thinking.
Okay. All right. Elijah, how about you?
When I think about critical thinking, I tend to think about more of like a discussion, so less like a daily task type of thing, but more like when I'm talking to people or reading something on the news or like that's when I feel, and other people tend to use critical thinking. And that's how I kind of perceive that.
So were you taught critical thinking? Like, first off, let me ask you this question. How much critical thinking was happening in your family? Let's say around the dinner table. Don't throw anyone under the bus, by the way.
I don't know that, at least I personally did. Like, I don't think I did a whole lot growing up. It was more of like a learned behavior kind of.
Where'd you learn
after
it?
It's hard to say. It wasn't like one event or something. It was more like I would say late high school. I'm starting to become an adult and everything, and I starting to pay attention more to things that I see on TV and in the news and everything. And so I used to just kind of agree with whatever my parents told me, because I trusted them, my parents and everything. They know what's best for me and all that.
Wait, but
and
now,
then-
but now,
and
if
then-
you're, but hang on, here's a question though. But if you're thinking critically, you would probably say, would you say my parents know what's best for me, or would you say,
I was saying that was like a reason I just kind of accepted what they told me. 'Cause
You accepted
like
what
that's
they
that's
told
like
you.
the your parents know what's best
yeah,
for you
got
type
you.
of thing.
Okay. And then you get to a point where you say, wait, hang on, I got to figure some stuff out on my own.
Yeah, and I say late high school because that's like kind of the point in your life when you start, gaining your own independence and everything, and stuff like that. So having the full picture of things is a lot more important, and so I just kind of started paying a lot more attention, and I was like, okay, but kind of back to that being objective about things, I sort of told myself, okay, when I hear something, I need to kind of just wait a minute and like try to get all the facts, try to compare everything
Okay.
to the best of my ability, and then
All
make a
right.
decision from there.
Okay. Robin, I have a question for you. And use I statements here, right? Start with I. How often, first off, how many of your friends would you say, first, hang on, around the dinner table in your family, would you say, if I were watching, would I say, hey, these people are critical thinkers? Or would I say something else?
I think for my family personally, when we're at a dinner table, we don't really talk to each other. We're rather watching the TV. We're watching like people eat things on YouTube, cooking shows and stuff like that.
You mean like mukbang or
Yeah,
something?
and then like
You're watching mukbang while you're eating?
yeah, I think it's really appetizing. So
Yeah. Well, it kind of is in a way, right? All right. Do you know what mukbang is, by the way? Yeah. Do you know what it is, Charlie? Can you tell people what it is?
So mukbang is kind of like a YouTube channel where like the YouTuber is eating like a lot of food, and like it just kind of makes you feel like satisfied in a way when you watch them eat that much food.
All right. Okay. Hold the mic close. Hey, so here's a question. How many of your friends are critical thinkers?
I would say most of them are critical thinkers.
Yeah, and because
Because when we're engaging in conversation, they would respond after thinking what I said most of the time.
uh-huh.
So that would make them a critical thinker.
Okay. Hey, Charlie, wait, how about you, man? Because you're Jewish, right? So, like, critical thinking, part of Judaism is, a core part of Judaism is thinking critically and arguing. You argue with other people, you argue with God, you argue with everybody.
True. I would say growing up, I was really taught to critically think. I was taught to make my own decisions based off what was presented in front of me. So, yeah, there is a lot of thinking, I would say, within my family. Well, my dad's Catholic, actually, so my mom and my dad, they made the discussion, they chose to raise us Jewish, but it was ultimately a personal choice for us. Do you want to keep going with Hebrew school? Do you want to become a bat mitzvah? Do you want to do these things with your life? And ultimately, my twin brother and I were like, yes, we want to. And we kept going. And keeping going really helped me continue my thought and come up with opinions that weren't forced upon me. I was able to make them myself.
You know, when I was being, I don't know if I would say this, converted into a Christian. I grew up United Methodist. Okay. By the way, I'm named after my mother's gynecologist. Who was
that's
Jewish. His name
nice.
was Shmuel.
So Samuel.
Yeah. Dude, my mom, I was the fifth child.
It's a very respectful thing, actually, to be named after someone in Judaism.
Holy man, no, she really liked this
Must
guy.
have been a good guy.
So, yeah, for me it's a big thing, and I always, because I like to argue, and I'm like, I feel like I'm like 1% Jewish. You know what I mean?
Most people are, so.
Yeah, at that level.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, there's a term, la shem shemaya or something like that, where it's like you argue with God, you argue for heaven, you know what I mean, or something like that. It's pretty cool. But it's such a big part of Jewish culture to argue. This is the Talmud, the Torah, just to argue, right?
Yeah, it's all about coming up with opinions, your own interpretations, and just all around. So I'm a Reformed Jew. There's obviously other religions, there's tons of different sectors, and there's Orthodox Jews, there's conservative Judaism, there's all these types of Judaism. So Reform Judaism is really about making your own opinions. So you take in the Torah, you take in the stuff, and then you come up with your own opinions.
Yeah. No, it's pretty cool. Well, that's where they come up with this idea. If you put 3 Jews in a room, you have 100 opinions or whatever. I mean, there are many variations of that. But that's the way it should be, right? You put 3 students in a room, you have 50 or 100 opinions, right? This is the idea.
Yeah, in my opinion, I'd rather everyone have opinions than just stick to what everyone's saying and not come up with something of their own.
Yeah, no, this is the thing, right? This is critical thinking. You know, you argue, and in Judaism, right, you're arguing with God. So a lot of people would say, Muslims, other Christians would say, well, you can't argue with God. But, if you're Jewish, the whole point is to argue with God, and we should be arguing with God because, God creates this thing. My wife always says, it's crazy, right? We get put here and there's no operating instructions. And so for me, for example, I've had a lifetime of arguing with God. That's all I do is argue with God. And, she's like, sometimes I'm discussing, but a lot of times I'm arguing, and she's okay with it. It's good. She, by the way. God's got to be a she. Hey, so I have a question. How about critical thinking in Penn State? How much are you really engaging in critical thinking at Penn State?
I think when people walk on the sidewalk really slowly, they're not critically thinking.
How about, okay, that's one, but how about in your classes? How about think about most of what you do in your classes. How much of it is really critical thinking?
I would say not much.
And why would, what?
A lot, well, in my experience, a lot of coursework tends to be just kind of a professor giving a lecture and you know taking notes on it or whatever. Sometimes you'll have in my physics classes we'll do recitations where we kind of work through problems conceptually. So I would say that would be in a group that would be conceptual thinking or critical thinking. But a lot of the time, especially in gen eds and stuff, it's just you're just kind of there.
Yeah, but every class, really.
Yeah.
You're just taking information.
You're just kind of,
You're putting it in notes and you memorize it for exams or whatever.
Yeah.
Robin, how about you, man? How much critical thinking are you doing?
I think in a lot of my classes, I am doing the critical thinking.
You're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, for example, I'm an economics major. So when we're learning the theory and the professor is doing their slides, that's when I'm not really critically thinking. But when they ask, if you apply it to this situation,
Yep.
For example, a modern situation, with the tariffs or trade and everything like that, then if you apply it then you'll have to start critically thinking.
Are you doing critical are you engaged with thinking critically because that's who you are, or more because it's demanded of you in college?
I think there is a mix of both. Because I don't think every student in class would be critically thinking when the professor asks, like, if you apply it to current economics,
No.
if you would, like, how would you think what would happen in the future or things like that.
Yeah.
But then I would say, like, some students also do think, like, what would happen and things of that nature.
Okay. Charlie, how about you? How much critical thinking has happened here versus at, religious school, right?
I would say definitely with just like the gen eds I'm in right now, lack of critical thinking.
What's happening in your gen ed classes?
Not a lot. It's a lot of being talked to, and then you write the notes, and then most of the assignments are just off the notes that were in class or stuff you read. So not a lot of it's opinion based, which I think is a lot of critical thinking is opinions and stuff like that. Because
a lot of what passes as critical thinking is opinions.
Yeah.
What passes as? Because critical thinking is not.
It's like
opinion.
Science and facts. I feel like, but
well, I mean, it's a lot of things. You're taking a lot of things and
putting a lot of things together. But for like some of my classes, there's more opinion work, and I think that's where critical thinking actually starts to show, and I get to do more of it.
Do people challenge other people's opinions? I mean, how often are you seeing people?
Most of my classes are probably 200 people. So the one class I had that was like 20 people, I guess we had a couple different opinions, but still, like, I'm in really big lectures, so you're not really challenging these unless I've had 2 labs for my classes. So I guess a class that really shows this was Bi-Sci 3, which a lot of people take. It's a pretty popular gen ed. And that's a class where you're meant to have opinions and you're meant to come up with stuff. And we have lab on Fridays or Thursdays. And
you're meant to think outside the box.
You put your phone away, you come up with answers, you're honest, you're open. And I think that's where the critical thinking is. But I don't think it's in classes any more than 100 people.
Like, I'm just wondering, like, kind of how is that? Well, first off, y'all are paying a lot of money for your education, and unless you're kind of pushing it on your own, you're not, like you are, right? Like you guys are at some level. If you're not doing it on your own, you're just taking in information, spitting it back out, and getting your degree. And
I think it's really easy to be a body, like in this school. You can just be a person who goes to class, does their work, gets fine grades, but doesn't have an opinion and doesn't participate. And I think that's when you're not getting your money's worth unless you're participating in stuff the school has to offer. You're being a body in class. You're, I guess, volunteering, or you're actually looking up from your seats right now, and you're not dozing off and going on your phone.
So there's a lot of people in here, for example, like in an ideal world. What would be the ideal thing to have happen for people who are sitting in this room? We're talking about critical thinking.
They have a new idea at the end of class, and they have something that motivates them, or they simply got through an hour and a half of lecture and they're not bored.
No, yeah, okay. Oh, okay, all right. Robin, how about you? Like, what if you were sitting out there? You're up here now, but you could have, if I hadn't chosen you today, you'd be sitting there. What would you be doing?
I would be thinking how I would be responding to these questions and how I might engage in this conversation.
How would you know that you're not just lying to yourself or just making something up? Because we all want to think we're smarter than we are. We all think we're smarter than we are. You should know, this is actually really valuable, everybody, that when we ask people to rank themselves on different categories, like, so for example, how to compare yourself to all of your peers at Penn State, where do you rank yourself in terms of your ability to get along well with other people? Are you above average or below average?
In Penn State, I would
say Penn State. Yeah.
I would say below average, to be honest.
Okay, all right. How about in the world?
I'd say average.
What would you say? For both? Yeah, just the world. Compared to your peers. How about this? Just compared to other people.
I think that I would get along well with other people, but I'm not sure if they would get along well with me.
I would say something very similar. I think I am able to get along with and coexist with people pretty well. I can't say the same for others, though.
Oh my God. This is actually pretty cool, y'all, by the way. And a part of this is because you have microphones. And one of the reasons I love doing class like this is because when you have the microphone, you have to stop and think. Like, you really stop and think. The data are that 98% of anybody to whom we ask that question will say, I am above average. Not only am I above average, but something like 3 out of 4 people will say they're in the top 10% of the ability to get along well with people and engage other people because I'm just so wonderful, right? That's what we say. Things like recycling. Yeah, no, I recycle, but nobody else recycles. Well, virtually 100% of everybody says that. I care about the planet. I recycle. I take care of things. I make sure that, things work well and around me and all of that. And basically everybody says that. But other people, they don't do that. So this is why I'm asking you about critical thinking. Like, what would you be doing? And you're all saying, like, yeah, I think. Did I ask you? If you were in here, what would you be doing to ensure that you were thinking critically?
Well, to that, I was going to say that, kind of building on what they said, at least, like, particularly with something like this, it takes some level of, like, I guess the word would be passion. So, like, if you don't care at all about what's being lectured about, then you're not going to probably pay attention or enjoy it a lot.
Yeah, but, okay, but let me push back on that. I think it's really easy to care about a lot of things, but you could be really passionate about many, many, many things, but you walk into a classroom and let's say we're going to talk about, I don't know, the future state of the planet. And, I come in the classroom, I'm like, oh my God, and here's these 3 instructors. They come up and they're going to teach, they're going to talk. We're going to talk about the future state of the planet. Man, bro, the planet, right? Ask this guy, this is a big deal. The planet. You got billions upon billions upon billions of planets, and we're going to talk about the future state of this one, which you're not even sure exists once you get into astrophysics, right? And so I walk in here, and I'm sitting in the class like, dude, we're going to talk about the future state of the world. And then you guys start droning. You put slides up. Okay, start taking notes. You start droning on. And, like, the passion goes right out the window, man. And well, it should. And well, it should. Because woe be the person. Woe be the person. Does that make sense? Woe be the person. Theo, that sounds like a Jewish thing to say. Woe be the person, right?
I would say there's a lot of phrases, yeah.
There's so many phrases. Yeah. I swear, I know I was a rabbi in a past life. Okay, so in a bad one.
Honestly?
Too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably. No, and a bad one, because people argue with me all the time. That's why I had to come back now and be a teacher, because I had to try to
Just
work it
imagine
out.
this is your congregation.
Yeah, except they'd be arguing. They'd all be ready to argue with me, So, and I'd want them to. That's the point. That's the point. So anyway, you come here, imagine that you're not enraged. When you go, you pay a lot of money, especially, bro, you're an international student, man. You're paying a lot of money, and you're out of state, So, and you're not enraged at the fact that all you're being asked to do is get your notebook out and take notes. No critical thinking. If you're not enraged, it's almost like, oh my God, you've died already. You've died. You're dead. It's all over.
I also think there's something that's special about this class and critical thinking is, well, I've wanted to check my phone probably 1,000 times since sitting up here, but what's special with this class is that you really enforce the no phones, and I find that I'm on my phone all the time. We all are, and sitting today in econ, I'm on my phone, and I'm I feel like I'm wasting away my money.
Yeah,
but
you should be, because you are.
It's true, but then we all have the normal tendencies to be like, I have to go on my phone, I have to check this.
Yeah, well, why wouldn't you be on your phone? And there are any number of things
Yeah.
on your phone that are far more interesting than taking notes in a class that you don't need. I mean, I encourage you, it's like, look, don't be on your phones because we're going to try to make this really interesting. If you get on your phones, then I lose my passion to try to make it more interesting than what's on your phones. And what is on your phones is the world, man. You know what I mean? Like, you can watch videos about astrophysics, which are far more interesting than anything that I could talk about in this class. But okay, let me ask you this question. First off, do we have a question from the stream? I think we do. But the next question I'm gonna. This is my. Yeah. All right. Go ahead. Wait. All right, wait, we don't have a question yet. So, is there one? All right, hang on. How often do you all find yourself saying to yourself, God, I'm really lacking in my ability to think. Like, I'm really lacking in my ability to think. How often are you saying that?
All the time.
Yeah, like what's sake?
I feel like
give me an example.
I feel like every day we make decisions that not that we regret, that if you could walk back 30 seconds, you would change your mind. And I feel like today, walking to this class, I'm really close. So I chose not to wear my long coat and I'm just wearing my regular coat. And I walked outside and it's 14 degrees out. And about 5 steps in, I was like, wow, I feel like I'm really lacking my ability to think about how cold I'm about to be. And I don't have my scarf and I'm not wearing my long coat. And that was just a 30-second thing that's really not that big of a deal, like in life.
Let me ask you this question. How about this? Tariffs.
Oh, God.
What do you know about tariffs?
They're taxes on imported goods.
Yeah, okay.
Is that right?
Well, yeah.
Ish.
Okay. What do you know? Are they good or bad? Trump raised
Bad.
all these.
Bad if you raise them.
Why are they bad? You know, you got
Because
half the
people don't like
economists
them.
Do you got
It's bad for me. It's bad for my
Why is it
money
bad for you?
spending.
It's not bad for you if you're in a
Because
certain.
my spending is more expensive.
Yeah, well, so
This is really
buying.
bad.
What if you're buying things that are here's
Buying.
the point. Here's the point. I just asked you a question that economists, bro, are arguing about and have been arguing about forever. Okay? And I asked you the question, so you answered it. Right? Now, in an ideal world, now we can start going back and forth on it, but in an ideal world, thousands of books are written on things like tariffs. So in an ideal world, you almost, if you're truly practicing critical thinking, you wouldn't have an opinion about anything at all. Because be like, how can you have an opinion about something? Dude, how can you have an opinion about something that you really know nothing about?
I think a lot of people do that. And
Okay.
that kind of hurts.
Okay. Well,
Society.
you just demonstrate because I pushed it for you. No,
I
hang
know
on.
a little bit.
Okay, no, hang on. I'm not critiquing you. I'm just using you right now. Like,
That's
see
okay.
how easy it is because I
signed
pushed
up.
you on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. But it's good. How often? How about you guys? How often do you find yourself saying, "God, I'm really an idiot"? Like, oh my God. Like, I don't know. You're being asked to weigh in on something, and you don't know. And you weigh in, and when the words are coming out of your mouth, you're going like, oh, God, I'm such an idiot.
To be honest, if I don't know something, I would just outright say that I don't know. But inside, I wouldn't be saying I'm an idiot because I'm sure that a lot of people in the world don't know either.
Yeah.
But also in some cases, like when I make stupid mistakes, like when I cook at home and I accidentally put like too much sugar in something, I would say, oh, well, yeah.
Okay, let me ask you this question. Tariffs. So you know how complicated the issue is, right?
Very complicated.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you, hey, what do you think about like Trump just right now, threatening to raise tariffs on all the European countries? And what would be the best critical thinking response to that question?
Would say from my perspective, as a person who buys a lot of international goods in the US, I have noticed that the prices have slightly went up. And from my perspective, that's not a good thing because I'm spending more money.
Okay, so how is it a good thing from someone else's? From someone else's perspective? Why would that
Like
be
if a
good?
person like wants to buy a lot of American goods, then they would be like, oh, then that like for example, someone who produces American goods, they would want.
Okay, so let me ask you this. At what point would you jump on Kaltalk or Naver or Facebook or something, right? You would jump on something, Weibo, and you would put your opinion out there about tariffs. At what point would you do that? Would you be like, okay, I'm confident enough, I know enough, I'm going to contribute to this conversation?
I don't think I would ever put my own opinion on any of those.
Yeah?
I would not.
Because
as an international student,
no, okay, but forget.
like if I was in Korea,
Yeah.
I still wouldn't because I wouldn't classify myself as an expert.
What
Like-
makes an expert, though?
Like someone who has like a much higher degree than an undergraduate degree.
Yeah,
like,
but, well, hang on. That doesn't mean anything. Am I an expert?
let's say in sociology, yes.
How could I be an expert, bro? Bro, can I tell you the question? This class is race, ethnicity, and culture. I have never once in my life read a book about or called race, ethnicity, and culture. Ever in my life. Am I an expert?
Still say you aren't an expert.
Well, but dude, I don't know anything.
But-
I really, honestly, in the realm of things there are to know, I know almost nothing.
But in order to reach this profession, you had to go through the specific steps in order for the majority of the world to think that you are an expert, I would say.
You know what the steps were mostly? You know what first off, what do you think about that? And then I'm going to tell you what the steps were.
When do I think I would?
Yeah. When do you know enough? You're a good enough critical thinker that you can weigh in on something. Like Trump's tariffs.
I think it's hard to quantify that. So for instance, I don't know a whole lot about tariffs. I've heard arguments, kind of good and bad,
Okay.
that they're good and bad. But I don't know a whole lot about, the intricacies of everything. I think in order for me to, for example, make a public statement about them, there would have to be some amount of study or observation or
Something would have to click in.
something
your
would
mind.
have to, yeah.
So what are you thinking about are you on Facebook?
Not really, no.
What do you look at? What's your social media feed? Reddit?
Instagram.
Okay, what do you think on Instagram when you see one person after another posting about tariffs and the U.S. administration and Greenland? Doe, how about this? What do you think? Greenland? Should we take it over? Good thing, bad thing?
I think it's very complicated. I don't
Okay,
necessarily.
Stop right there. All right, hang on. Stop right there. Good thing, bad thing?
Bad thing.
Dude, hang on. Well, are you an expert on Greenland suddenly?
No, I'm not.
Wait, well, how did you go from tariffs are complicated to Greenland is not complicated? Because by saying that, it's like it's not complicated.
But saying my own opinion
Okay,
on this
your own
class
opinion, all right.
in this class is different from posting something
Oh,
on
all right, okay,
Instagram
okay.
and saying
But even then, hang on. I'm going to practice something here. Got it? I could find you enough really, really, really smart, thoughtful people, like this many people who are smart, thoughtful, who would be like, yeah, you know what? We should maybe, moving into Greenland would be a really, really good thing. Yeah, A good thing for a wide range, and they would give you so many different reasons that would have nothing to do with like just who knows, right? For the world, it would be a great thing. And then I could find you an equal number of people who would say like, man, that's a really bad thing for all of these reasons over here, okay? What's going to lead you to go more toward them or more toward them? What do you think it would be that would lead you to lean that way or lean this way?
I think that comes back to our subject of critical thinking. So like you weigh in on the opinions, you lean towards what you as yourself agree more to.
Yeah.
And that's how you decide on whether you agree that buying Greenland is a good thing or not.
So, okay, but we've already assessed that, but at what point, and at what point, when we go back to you, Charlie, at what point does your opinion, critical thinking, right? Does your opinion even matter when you got that many really smart people and you got going one way, you got that many really smart people going the other way? At what point could you have any confidence to weigh in on it one way or the other? When they could, by the way, think about the smartest rabbi you know, who could just argue anybody, just spin, and you're going to be like, yeah, I'm going to go in the middle of these rabbis over here, and I'm going to tell them they're wrong, because go with them. At what point would you do that?
Well, I should not decide what Greenland gets to do, or we get to do with Greenland, because I am not there. On the genius side, probably more over there on the don't do it, because I know nothing about it. I guess it's when you decide you have your own enough opinions built up in yourself and enough knowledge that you've discovered and picked up on and enough research that you can make this own decision thoughtfully.
When does that happen?
I don't think you can classify.
When do you think it's going to happen for you?
Maybe when my prefrontal cortex develops.
Dude, when do you think it happened for me?
At 25.
Listen, man, I want to go back to you. You know what we do to get these advanced degrees? You know what you do? You sit in your classes and you take notes and you spit it back and you take exams and then you write papers and you give them to the professors. And in graduate school, when you're getting your master's and your PhDs, once they let you into the program, they already assume you're pretty smart because they let you in. So you're already starting elevated. So they assume you're smart. It's much easier than undergrad because you start with you have to prove that you're not very smart, and that's difficult to do, okay? If you're just average. And then you get through the whole thing and you take your exams and you do this and you do that, and then you get put out in the world as an expert. Which is much different than you all when you graduate. You're an expert. So when I hear you say that, like, oh no, Sam, you're an expert, it's like, on this subject matter, I think I'm not. I've been teaching it for 40 years. I don't know anything.
But if you're not an expert, why would Penn State allow you to teach for over 40 years?
Because they need someone to teach.
So why specifically you?
Because I'm the knucklehead who said I will teach this class. So I teach. You got to have someone do it, and then you have to vet somebody. So you vet. And then you put them in a role and they do what they do. But this is like critical thinking, like, hang on. We have a question. We have a question from the stream. So Stephen from England, does anyone believe that they're refraining from critical thinking? How often are you not, I want to flip this. How often do you shut your mind down, your brains down? You dumb down, either to match people around you or to match what's going on in a class. How often does that happen?
I'm very bad at that.
You're not good at that?
Shutting my brain down?
How about just pretending that you're not as smart as you are, or just...
Oh, all the time.
Or how often are you in situations where you're just like...
I wouldn't say smart is the word.
Okay, but I'm bored out of my mind and I'm just going to
Oh, all the time.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, me too, all the time.
All the time? Elijah?
I would say that I definitely do it when, like, so frequently people in my friend group or in my kind of social circle, things will happen and they'll be giving opinions. And a lot of times it'll be easier to just kind of not necessarily not critically think, but not contribute.
Yeah. Because it just,
'Cause it's just
if you contribute, it's just going to be as lame as everybody else. I got this question. Okay, here's another question. People in here who are not critical thinkers, not thinking, not really wanting, they don't want to grow to be really, really good thinkers, to be the best thinkers they can possibly be. The people who don't want to do that, why? What keeps them from that? Robin, what do you think? Like, what keeps the people who are, let's say someone's here and she's like, yeah, I'm here to get a job, and like I'm gonna, remember last class, I'm gonna pay my roommate to take my exams for me, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. I don't care.
I think critically thinking is very exhausting, and it requires a lot of like physical and mental like strength to do it constantly.
So for you, it's exhausting.
Exactly. So like when I'm trying to relax, I'm not trying to critically think. Like if I put something on the TV, I'm not exactly trying to critically think. I'm just turning my brain off and just watching. So I think for people who not exactly aren't critical thinkers but don't want to do it, it's because they can't really be bothered to.
Got you. Sam, and then Elijah, I want to ask you, how often do you feel like as though I just need to get to an answer? I don't effing care if I'm wrong. I just need an answer. Like, I gotta have an opinion. Tariffs are good, tariffs are bad. It doesn't matter which one it is. I just need an opinion, and so you just grab an opinion, and you're like, fuck. How often is that happening to you? Yeah, to you. How often do you
A
think
lot, I would say. I feel like I do pick up people's opinions just so I don't have to come up with my own.
Ah, damn. Okay, all right. How often do you think people around you are doing that?
I think everyone in this room does that.
We all do it. I do it oftentimes. Usually I just pick up my wife's opinions because she's really smart. Or I have a couple of professorial friends. I have one who's standing in the back. I ask him a lot of times, like, dude, what are you thinking about this? And then he says, and I'm like, okay, I'll buy that opinion. How about you, man? When people here who are just, I'm happy to be dumb. You know, by the way, people around the world, one of the critiques of Americans is that there is an element of, and I don't think this is true just of Americans, but it's a thing that people say. It's like we celebrate stupidity. It's like, yeah, I'm really stupid. I just like football and beer. Yeah, fuck yeah. You know, and it's like, whoa, oh my God, really, dude? Seriously? Okay. What do you think?
So I think that not only is it exhausting to be a critical thinker, but I think it can also be uncomfortable. So
yeah, what makes it uncomfortable?
People, I think it's really hard to, even for me, like to accept that you're wrong about something. Like you were saying earlier, everyone's always like, oh, I recycle or I get along with people, and the data shows otherwise. Yeah. So like people like to be right. People like to think they're right. And so a lot of times with critical thinking, you end up thinking, oh, I was kind of wrong about this, or it's I don't have the full truth.
You always come to that.
Yeah, most of the time, yeah.
No, always. Because even the laws of physics you study, right? Yeah. In 100 years, man, we might find that, you know, gravity works 100% of the time, except that, check out, watch light bend, you know, or something. Robin, what makes it hard to accept being wrong?
I think the fact that I think it's some sort of embarrassment that people feel when they like when majority of people say you're wrong, and you feel like, oh, like I think some sort of embarrassment happens inside your mind that makes it hard to accept that you're wrong.
Can I tell you a story? Once I can tell you a story. Okay, 1991, spring of 1991. It was the spring semester of my first year teaching at Penn State. I was teaching a class on social institutions, I think it was. I don't know what it was. And I was at the chalkboard, yeah. And I'm writing something on the chalkboard, and I misspelled a word. A simple word. I misspelled it. And I turned around, and someone said, hey, you misspelled that word. It was a very simple word, right? That anybody would spend. Probably not a single one of you would misspell it. But I really I didn't misspell it, make a mistake. I really thought it was spelled the way I wrote it. And I turned around, and I felt my face get really red with embarrassment. Okay? And I sat down. I pulled a chair out. My chair. I sat in my chair. There's about 25 of us in the room. And I said, I don't know why I'm really embarrassed over that. There's tens of thousands of words that I would misspell. Like, I don't know why I'm embarrassed over that. That's the craziest thing that's ever happened to me. I don't know why. And I went, huh. And after that, in that moment, as a teacher, I was never embarrassed again for making a mistake. Because what I said to myself was, there's so much information in the world. Like, you're an idiot if you would be embarrassed toward anything, right? Like, oh my God. So anyway, all right, Ian from Kansas City says, do you consider going through the Socratic method when you think critically? The Socratic method, you just ask questions upon questions upon questions, which you do in religious school, man, Hebrew school, dog.
See the definition.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. There you go. It's just asking. You're
Then
never
yes,
right.
yes. Never right. I don't know.
Well, eventually you are, but it doesn't matter because there's always some other rabbi who's arguing the opposite. So it's like you're never right. Ever.
Sure, let's ask all the questions, always.
Always. So you just keep going. Do you?
I don't see the difference between that and playing devil's advocate.
Okay, it's similar. Just keep asking questions. Uh-huh.
And you are asking if that's like critically thinking.
Yeah.
I'd say from the perspective of the person who's asking the questions, then they are critically thinking. And then for the person answering, it depends on if they're constantly repeating the same thing or if they're trying different angles to persuade the other person to agree on their opinion.
Okay, let me ask you this question then. People who don't like to engage in critical thinking or who don't really engage, speak right here to that camera, right there. You can speak to that one. How would their lives be better? How would their lives improve if they said, you know what? Actually, critical thinking, Socratic method, arguing for the sake of heaven, your lives would improve if you engaged in this more.
Well, I think if you're always agreeing to other people's opinions, then what's the point of living if you're just going to be there and just constantly agreeing without your own opinion?
Hey, so you went to school in China. How was it in China going to school?
Well, I went to an international school.
Okay.
So like they actually promoted thinking in different angles, viewing things from different cultures.
And how are you different from your Chinese friends? Who didn't go to international school? Did you have any friends?
Not from like local Chinese school.
What was your gut feeling though for local Chinese?
I think, well, in first grade, I went to a local Chinese school, and like the education system there was really just like follow exactly what the teacher says.
Yeah,
and
that's probably how it was all the way through.
Yeah, I would guess that would be the case.
And what's wrong with that?
It kind of doesn't, like, studying isn't fun if you're just memorizing and answering like the like test questions.
Wait, studying isn't fun. Hang on. So can you, if you're just answering test questions, right? So for, if that's, yeah. Wait, hang on a second. Jamie, I got the same, but you need to know. So I have 2 earpieces that I wear. One is that I hear the microphones, because when you're up in the front, you can't hear really well. You hear much better in the back. And 2, I have a team of people who are watching the stream. One is Julie in Columbia, Jamie in Maryland, Jeff in PA, and they're talking to me in my ear. So while I'm talking to you all, they're talking to me, right? And that question that I just fed to you, that came right from Jamie, who's is like pretty cool. So I think we've said that a lot of what happens at Penn State is what he just said was not very fun. So what advice would you have with your fellow students? And then we're going to take another question from the stream. What advice would you have?
For, like, advice for what? Like,
yeah, well, how do you do it? How do you make learning fun?
Well, I would say, and this kind of ties into the why, just kind of following the leader might not always be the best thing. The reason I picked my major was because, well, one, I just found it really interesting, but I also, like, the whole motivation behind any field of science is to get at the truth, kind of no matter what it is. And I think there's a...
Wait, get at the truth no matter what it is.
No matter what it... So, like...
Wait, hang on a second, right? So you identify as conservative. You're the only conservative in your family?
Yeah.
What happened to you? No, something good happened. Because when you're the fish, when you're in a family and all the fish are swimming downstream, and you say, like, you know what, I'm not going to follow everybody else. I'm going to swim upstream or on my own stream. So what happened to you? What cool thing?
I don't really know. I think it was just kind of like a little bit at a time, little things kind of drove me to where I am. Like I used to just kind of agree with whatever I saw,
whatever
just,
people told
whatever
you
people told me.
Yeah.
And I didn't like sometimes whenever I thought about things, I wouldn't be able to justify why I had that position. So then I was like, well, then why do I think that?
Yeah.
And so then I would say that's kind of the start of when I kind of had that, try to be objective about everything.
Okay, you start. Okay,
yeah.
Here, we're going to practice it. You ready? Okay, are you ready, Charlie?
Yeah.
There are a lot of Americans out there, a lot of people everywhere in the world, because I'm here, because I'm connected to people all over the world, and we're talking to them, who think that this emboldening ICE and having ICE go and take people and find them and track them down and put them in detention and send them out of the country is like it's a really good thing, and it's a really important thing, and we need to do it. Okay? Can you imagine for you, before you would weigh in on that? There are a lot of really smart people who think that, okay? Really smart people who I'm like, whoa, man, I really respect the intellect of that person. How willing would you be to talk to them and say, hey, convince me that you're right? You being the liberal Jew that you are. This goes against everything you can imagine. How much would you be able to be like, how willing would you be to say, like, okay, really try to convince me. I want you to convince me. This is like him. I said to Elijah, what good thing happened to you that you went a different direction than your family? Because whatever happens is going to be a good thing, How willing would you be?
I would be willing to talk to them, but I'm not sure I would go in it with the mindset of I want to be convinced of your opinion.
Okay, well, let me help you with something. Yeah. To do critical thinking correctly, to really engage, you have to want to change your mind. I don't care what the topic is, you have to want to change your mind. And there's always other people who are smarter than you, who know more than you, have different insight, different experiences than you, who, if you heard from them, they would change your mind. And that's the danger, and that's why we don't like to do it, because it's like, oh shit, I don't want to do that. I don't really want to change my mind. That's what this class is, right? That's why it's so important, by the way, for those of you who have unconventional ideas. Like when we talk about ice, for example, in here, because we will talk about ice, we need a couple people sitting on this table up here who are like, no, I feel like this is really important and valuable. You need to be up here. Come on, man. Like, this is it. Do we have another question? Karen asks, how does holding a belief as part of your identity hinder critical thinking? Robin, wait, I should go back to you. How's holding that belief that I'm afraid the pro-ICE person might convince me? And what would that mean for me and all my friends and my family?
See, when I looked at that question, I was going to tie it into some Judaism.
Okay.
Instead of answering that question.
Yeah, we'll just do this one real fast.
Okay. I mean, it would hinder my critical thinking because I'm not going in it with an open mindset.
Yeah, and you're not going into it with the desire to really transform who you are.
No.
So, Robin, you have to be aggressively wanting to transform your consciousness to be a good critical thinker. No, you have to be. Can you see that?
I wouldn't say aggressively trying to change my own opinion on things.
Well, you almost have to be aggressive, because what you don't realize is that we get stuck in quicksand, and you don't even see it, and you gotta fight your way out of it, man. It's so powerful.
What if you're just open to having other opinions?
You're gonna fall back, man. You gotta be really hardcore. Yeah. All right, listen. Hey, can we have a round of applause? Yeah. You guys are great. Awesome.